Hello and welcome to All Your Gun Arguments Are Terrible. First off, before we start, a little bit about me. You probably clicked on this video, prepared to be furious at some tree-hugging, hemp-wearing hippie, but in fact I'm more of a libertarian. I'm also a veteran who fought for 4 years in Iraq. I'm not even necessarily anti-gun. I just happen to think that our current gun situation is kind of stupid, like how NRA lobbyists successfully defunded the CDC so that we can't even study gun violence anymore. And the fact that my mom, who I wouldn't trust with a toaster, owns several guns and a concealed carry license. It should be harder to buy a gun than it is to get a license to operate your own business. So what are my beliefs on guns? How I figure out all stances? The trick is to try to make things as close as possible to an ideal society and then scale it back until it's feasible. So if we can't feed every single person on Earth, feed as many as possible. And I don't know about you, but when I picture a perfect society, I don't picture every single person on Earth carrying a weapon. So enough preamble. Let's get into it. So I'm not arguing for or against guns here. I'm just making the point that all of the pro-gun arguments are terrible. For instance, argument number 1, it's in the Constitution. I don't care what you say, boy, it's in the Constitution. You're anti-America, it's in the Constitution. Alright, but so is the Three-Fifths Compromise. Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3 of the United States Constitution states that all slaves shall be counted as 3/5 of a person. My point is that the Constitution is not the infallible word of God. In fact, it's so flawed it's been amended 27 times, including the Second Amendment, which came 11 amendments before we freed slaves, and 17 amendments before women could vote. That's where we were at in society. We owned slaves and women couldn't vote when we made this amendment, and you're arguing that it's untouchable. Now, I don't want to argue the hyphens and the commas and the semantics of the Second Amendment, which I personally think was put there because the Founding Fathers didn't want to have a standing army. So this way, civilians could act as a militia on call. Now we have a standing army of the land, sea, and air. So personally, I think the Second Amendment is moot, but instead, I'll just point out that the amendments and our rights have limits. For example, we have the right to free speech, but not if it incites people to violence. The Eighth Amendment says cruel and unusual punishment can't be inflicted, but what that is, what cruel and unusual entails, is up for debate. So following this logic, you would think the Second Amendment, or the types of arms people can bear, would be up for discussion. I think most people would agree that the right of people to keep and bear arms does not mean the right of the people to keep and bear tanks or Apache helicopters. So there are gray areas, and having a discussion about your right to keep a small arsenal of AK-47s does not violate your constitutional rights, nor is it un-American. Here's another one of your terrible arguments. Criminals don't follow laws. You're just taking guns away from law-abiding citizens. All you're doing is putting guns in criminals' hands. This is one of the dumbest arguments you have, because you are literally arguing for the removal of all laws. You're advocating for no legal system. If criminals don't follow laws, then why have laws at all? If only law-abiding citizens are going to follow the laws about not murdering, why do we have laws about not murdering? Here's another terrible argument. I need them in case I need to defend myself from a tyrannical government. All gun nuts seem to have this fantasy where the government comes to get them, and they have to go into this Rambo or Red Dawn situation where they're living in the mountainside with a cachet and their friends fighting back against oppression. But the problem with that is that the government is not some faceless entity. The government is not a thing that comes to get you. If the president orders that all guns be taken by force or some ridiculous thing that you've got in your head, who will they send to get you? The police, the National Guard. Who makes up these groups? The same gun-loving rednecks insisting that they need protection from the government. Do you think these flag-waving hillbillies are going to turn on the American people just because their government told them to do so? Here's another terrible argument. The only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. Well, what's the difference between a bad guy and a good guy? Their intent. And how can we know what that is until the moment the trigger is pulled? This current pro-gun stance of allowing people to walk around strapped with rifles on their backs is the same as letting a Muslim strapped with explosives get on a bus. Everyone just gets all tensed up, but they don't want to make a scene, so they think, I'm sure he's one of the good guys. Until the moment he's not one of the good guys and everyone dies. Social media is now filled with these fat old guys carrying rifles in public places, and all I can think is, thanks, I'm a felon who couldn't pass the background check. It's kind of you to do all the work for me and bring it to me, and now I will easily overpower you. You've marked yourself as a target, and you have no idea what I'm planning. Again, you guys all have this fantasy where you save the day and we all lift you up on our shoulders and parade you around, but you're the ones I'm worried about. Any jackass can currently get a concealed carry license after just a few hours over the weekend, half of which is spent in the classroom. Hell, soldiers have to go through extensive training for months and still accidental discharges happen. And I'm supposed to trust the dexterity and responsibility of some unathletic civilian who's trying to cosplay and save the day? As I go about my daily routine encountering morons, assholes, and dipshits, at no point do I think to myself, it would be much better if this person was carrying a loaded gun. Finally, we come to our last terrible argument. If you take away guns, people will just kill each other with knives. In places with the strictest gun laws, people get stabbed all the time. Well, if knives are just as deadly, why not be content with the right to bear knives? Of course, we all know the answer to that. You can outrun a person with a knife, you can't outrun a bullet. Here's a perfect example. On December 29th, there was a gun attack and a knife attack on the same day. In a church in Texas, a man walked in, pulled out a gun, and started shooting. He was shot down immediately by an undercover FBI agent and several other people who were carrying in the church. This was as perfect as it could have gone. It was immediate response to a gunman by other gunmen. And still 2 people died. On the same day in New York, a man armed with a long machete walked into a rabbi's house, calmly attacked everyone, and left. He went home, he had so much time. And only 5 people were injured, no one died. It's stupid to think that knives are just as bad as guns. Not to mention, knives serve other purposes. Violence with knives is something we put up with because knives are useful in other ways, whereas guns only have one purpose, and that's to cause harm. Let's look at a visual example now, using Fallout 4 as a visual aid. A game which has 0 flaws to this day. Absolutely no flaws whatsoever, patched on day 1 and flawless. I can't use my main character for this, Razor Mudguts, because she's maxed out. She's a knife champion of the world and has never seen a gun in her life. Wouldn't be a fair comparison. So instead, let's go to my backup character, who's a diplomat at heart. I don't even remember his name. First, let's see what happens when someone decides he wants to cause harm to people on a massive scale with a blade. First, I have to go to the target, which limits me to 1 at a time. I have to be at their physical location. Also, wielding a knife puts me at a disadvantage with others who do have guns. Because I only have a blade, which is only a couple feet long, others are not afraid to gang up on me because they know that my range is limited. They know that they can dodge my attacks. They know they can take a couple and not be killed. And before you know it, doctors are bare-knuckle fist fighting me to death. But I have to be in the action. I have to go to the crowd that I want to kill. This netted me a kill count of 1. Next up, if I take a small magazine rifle of any kind, immediately my tactics can change. I don't have to be in the crowd. I don't have to be where I want to do the killing. I can pick a spot far away that's difficult to get to me. And instead of charging me, people back away and hide from me. Except for this asshole with a baseball bat. Again, unlike a melee weapon, I can back away. I can let them come to me because they know they can't afford to stay back since I have unlimited range, basically. Whereas before I had a killing distance of about 2 feet in front of me. And in this scenario, the only thing that stops me is that I run out of ammunition. Something that lawmakers are actually trying to pass in their bills targeting high ammo magazines. But since shotguns are completely legal, I can easily switch to another gun and continue mowing them down. Until finally I meet my demise. Upgrading to a gun puts my kill count at 4. Now, further prove a point. A ridiculous point that doesn't need to be proven. Except the deadlier the gun, the higher the ammunition, the less gun control, the easier it is to kill people. I mean, who's to say that the Second Amendment wasn't talking about my right to keep and bear a minigun? Miniguns count as arms. Without having to stop and reload, you can just mow people down, lure them into a little funnel. Just mow them down. In a matter of seconds, my kill count was something like 10 plus a robot. I lost count, it was so easy to kill people. And of course, if you want to take it a step further, rocket launchers are insta-kills. And let's say in the future we're still having this argument while wearing fancy dresses. Personal nuclear bomb launchers are my right, covered under the Second Amendment. And so are these fancy red shoes. Alright, you get my point. Do you agree or disagree, or do you not give a fuck? Leave comments below.